Welcome, everyone, back to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I am super excited to have such a long friend on the podcast who's been in the spiritual healing world for many, many years, has so much experience. Erin, sound frequency healer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here today.
This is something I ask every guest, given just the name of the podcast, but I'm also fascinated how each person is so uniquely connected to the divine feminine, and she expresses herself in so many infinite ways. So I'd love to hear, how is the divine feminine connecting and channeling through you right now?
I love this question so much because for me, I find that when we talk about the divine feminine, we often personify it a lot, which obviously I think the true divine feminine is so much more expansive and bigger than any human idea that we could place on this idea of feminine energy. But I think of it as yin a lot and surrender and flow. My own personal journey has been very connected to constant surrender and constant showing up to the moment fully and being in beingness and allowing and accepting and working with what is and what's in front of me. So the idea of the divine feminine for me is very important in every day of my journey, and allowing myself to fully let life live me as opposed to me thinking I'm living life.
Mm, so profound. I was just writing a blog actually, and it was about that connection for me, is how I have to be so on top of my healing journey, not in a way of like, let's go deeper and like
Mhm.
shame and guilt, but truly that's my only way to stay in the present moment, and that I can know that I'm being in this experience right now. And I was thinking for you, it's so interesting how you mentioned that like present surrender, the way that I see it. I don't know how your experience is with it, but I've seen you live this like beautiful nomadic life, and I imagine that that causes so much surrender that has to happen because you're constantly like, I have to just say wherever spirit wants to take me at this time, and then I have to like trust that it's all gonna fall and work into place, when like we live in a culture that just like says the opposite all the time. Has that been part of your journey with it?
Completely. I mean, and we can call it so many things. Like, I've had to sort of decapitalize my mindset. I've had to strip down my American identity. I've had to strip down my millennial identity. So many of these things that tell us that we have to go, 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 do, produce, do more, which tends to be considered more of a masculine mindset, which has kind of taken over the collective in really big ways. And I see more and more the feminine having an uprising, and rightfully so, coming back into her place of glory. Even just looking at, the ideas of so many people are having now of like working with the earth and, being one with life and the spiritual growth that's happened in the last 20 years or so. But yeah, so my own life has been this constant teaching of all of those things. I mean, I'm an Aries. I'm a manifesting generator. I'm someone who has a lot of fire and a lot of like, I want to make it happen yesterday. And my soul is constantly just like, relax, sit back. Here's the path. Here's the breadcrumbs. Go there, go here. You're collecting this, you're collecting that. And it's teaching me to be in the moment and, every single day. So, yeah.
Totally. And it kind of brings me to the idea of like curiosity and wonder, like in being in that moment, like you can truly be so surprised by the universe, by what's going to give you, rather than thinking like, oh, I want it all planned out and it's going to happen X, Y, and Z. And that makes me feel comfort and security. But it's just like a false sense of comfort and security in that, when really like we do desire just like that deep wonderment of being in the world.
Totally. I mean, even when I first went nomadic, like in 2012, people were always like, I'm so jealous of your life. And I was like, well, A, anyone could do this, but B, I think a lot of people would hate it because it does require so much trust. And I used to joke when people asked me how I did it, I'd be like, I have a trust fund, which was not, I don't have a trust fund, but, it was just this radical trust all the time, even when it seemed like everything was a disaster or I had no money or I didn't know what I was doing or, something would go wrong, which happened all the time. But, just this constant showing up to that process and allowing it, which was wild, but it carved so many things out of me in so many beautiful ways.
Mm. Well, I know you have so many talents as a healer because I've gotten to experience a lot of your modalities, but one that in particular, I remember the last time I think I did a workshop with you and you did a sound frequency healing. And I've been really always connected to the senses. I'm a Taurus rising and very into Tantra. And I had such like a visceral experience, like very clairsentient. So I could really feel the vibrations. And I also noticed like how profound it was because we did it in a group setting, how it really connected everyone together after. And I because I remember I brought my sister who's very um open but not as open into spirituality as I am used to with other people. And then I brought my boyfriend at the time there too. And I just remember them having this like really deep and profound connection that like I never even imagined that they would ever have. And I'm just so fascinated by the basically like unseen ways that sound frequency can really work and heal. Like it viscerally feels so good in my body. Like it feels like someone's giving me an energetic massage. And then after
Mhm.
there's this like wonderment of like, wow, it just like really connected everyone in the room. So can you explain to your best knowledge and your own experience, like what is sound frequency healing?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for that. That's so nice to hear because I don't always hear what people's experiences are when they come to my things, my events, my offerings. And I love hearing that kind of stuff afterwards of like, oh, it really opened this for me or it connected me to this because yeah, it just amazes me how unique each experience is and what different people take from these experiences. But I could talk about sound all day. It's literally my favorite topic, and there's so much to say about it. Um, at the end of the day, sound is our first language. Vibration is our first language. It is the first thing that we take in sense wise when we are created, when we are born. There's no turning off of sound. Like we can turn off most of our other senses in some way, shape, or form, but sound is always coming in and it's always being experienced. Even people who are deaf experience vibration and frequency. So it is this really magical tool, in my opinion, that will override so many things. So the way I use sound is very particular. There are so many aspects of sound healing. There are so many ways that it can be used. But the way I use it is very in alignment with channeling. And so I channel vocal sounds and vocal frequencies. And the reason I do that is because for me, the voice has always been my primary healing tool. I've been a singer my whole life. Music and sound was something that was very deeply connected to my soul truth from the beginning. And when I started using it as a frequency healing tool, so I make vocal sounds that sound sort of like sound bowls or different types of sound instruments. But to me, the voice is so dynamic and the voice is directly connected to our soul. So this is why people experience such joy and bliss through singing, through vocalizing, through communicating. There is a direct soul line, and it to me is the link between our humanness and the nothingness. So, I always describe sound as like humans when we talk, it's linear. It takes a while to communicate something. But if I make one sound or tone, that's a vertical download. Like I can bring in so many things in one sound. And in a way, it collapses time and space. So people will always think that I'm doing the sound healing for like 20 minutes. And it's usually about 4 or 5 minutes because when you go deep into that quantum field, anything is possible.
Mm.
And for me, quantum healing has always been the roots of my healing work in the world. and going into that dimension beyond time and space where anything can happen.
Mm.
So to me, sound is this link between that quantum world and this physical reality that we're all walking around in every single day. And the magic that can come through is truly profound and blows my mind on a regular basis.
Mm.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's a start.
Yes. I have so many follow-up questions I'm going to try to remember. So the first one is, are you specifically channeling different interdimensional beings? Does it feel like you're channeling another entity, or like more so tapping into like a whole field that you're channeling through? And then the second part of my question is, um during the sound healing and in that like subliminal space, do you feel where other people are going? So for example, my personal experience, I very much can feel like out of body, and I'm in that like
Mhm.
kind of theta state of like waking and dreaming. I'm having my own visions. Like, can you see like where people are like essentially going? Like, is each person have their own experience, or do you feel like you're kind of creating your own field in which everyone is kind of connected to?
Those are great questions. So, first of all, my sound channeling, I feel, comes from star systems. So that's what I was actually told when I started working with it, because I've always had a very deep and strong connection with my intuition and with my guides. And when I first started using this as my primary modality, probably about 8 or 9 years ago now was when I first tapped into it on a really big level. I was essentially told this comes from star systems that you are from. And it is a frequency, and often even an inaudible frequency that is carried on the sound waves that
Mm,
does something that is not native to this planet.
mm,
And I truly believe that everyone has that capacity with channeling. Like, that's one of the reasons I think people do channel or people do healing work, is often we are bringing through the aspects of ourselves that are unique to us, that are probably from other dimensions and other lives. And I think I've spent a lot of time in other galaxies. I don't know that I've done as much time here on this planet. And so for me, it just was like a no brainer, like, oh, yeah, there's this gift that I can bring in from this other place, like, and it will kind of override human resistance, which I was told it would do. And so that's why I use that the way that I do. And what was the second question again?
Wait, sorry, I have a sub follow-up and then I'll ask.
Go ahead, go ahead.
What star systems have you channeled in the past?
Well, it's not even specific ones. Like, I am fairly confident that I've spent time in a big handful of the popular ones that are talked about a lot, right? Like the Pleiades and Sirius, and like there's a lot of them that get mentioned on the regular that I'm like, yeah, I definitely have been there. But my personal feeling and experience has always been that a lot of the stars that I'm from are even more ancient. Like, I just feel like they don't even have names like that we know of. And part of me almost doesn't care. Like, I'm sort of like, okay, like there's just a handful of star systems that I've spent a lot of time in. Um, and I know that the ones that I've been in, things were a lot easier than it is here on this earth. So a big part of why I know I'm here on this in this lifetime is to make things a little easier and a little lighter for people. I've always felt that that was a big part of my mission, here on the planet, was that I have found easier ways to heal personally, and I'm here to transmit and bring those easier and lighter ways to other people. Like, it just doesn't have to be as painful as we often make it. And believe me, I've lived the pain, so I know what the pain is. Like, I got taken through that for sure. Like, here is the pain and suffering of humanity. Get into it. But I also know that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way going forward. So that's a big part of sound for me, is that it's this like sort of magical tool to lighten things and make things easier.
That's so cool, because when I think about the sound frequencies that you bring in, like, not a comparison, but the best comparison I can give right now that people can understand is like Avatar and the kind of sounds that they make.
Mm.
And it's very like that, like primordial, like almost like whale sounds that are coming
Yes.
through. And then when I think of like, obviously newer generation more so as mantras, even though that came from like 5,000 years ago, but that
Mhm.
is like a mantra doesn't necessarily distill down to English translation, right? It's like just this bead of sound and resonance that has so many multi-layered meanings within it. So that makes so much sense with the frequency that you're giving. It's like you are downloading like all of this like information, but like distilling it down to just one sound. And we don't even need to pull it apart. We need to do is take it in through our intuitive senses and feel it and being able to receive it, I guess. And that like
Exactly.
this is the downloads that we need. My other
Yes. Thank you. I love that description.
yeah, I mean, I'm loving the connections that I'm making from it and from you giving that. So my second part of the question was, can you feel where people are going during their
Mhm.
sound healing experiences? And do we go to the same
Yeah,
places? Is it different?
that's a great question because I do feel each person receives what they need from the sound. The only thing I know for sure is that it is opening time and space and bringing through healing that anyone is needing in that moment. Now, for one person, that might actually be a grounding, whereas for other people, that might be, a dropping out or a dropping into something bigger than themselves in that moment. It will express very differently through each person. If I'm working with someone one on one, I am very aware of where they are. I'm tracking it very closely, which is the beauty of doing one-on-one work, is that I get to do that. I get to show up really deeply, like where are you, what's coming through for you, what wants to happen here. When I work with groups, it's a little different, equally as fun, but it's more of an overall, I open the portal. I have done a lot of work over the years to know how to do that in a way that's very safe and very protected. And so I know very deeply that each person will receive what they need. And then I just trust that that will happen. And it does, everybody has a very different and unique outcome from that. So,
I love that. I would
mm.
love to hear some of the unique experiences that you have gotten from your one-on-one clients when they go through this sound frequency, because I imagine it really is like an adaptogen and just like covers what that person needs in the moment. But just to give our audience some clarity on what kind of experiences they can have.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I always have to really think back, like, okay, what are those, nuggets that happen that are so special? But it's everything from physical to emotional to spiritual to mystical. So sometimes, like, I've done work for clients when they're pregnant and in the birthing process, to work with the soul entering the body. And like I had one client that literally went into labor like an hour after we did the session, because we opened the birth portal. And she had been waiting to go into labor at that point. And I've like these are very practical ones. I've done a lot of work on people who have like chronic headaches, traumatic brain injuries, chronic pain. And everybody has different levels of like where it's coming from or like success rate. Some people, it's like one session and it can turn everything around. For other people, it needs some ongoing attention. I've done work with people to help restructure them energetically. So like sometimes, and this is a little bit more of like a spiritual issue, but like I've seen people with like way too blown out energy systems. Maybe they're incredibly sensitive. Maybe they're, connecting to things they shouldn't be connecting to on an energetic level. And that's actually some of my favorite work to do. I absolutely love energetic restructuring. It's like totally my jam. I'm just like, I can see it immediately. And I'm just like, okay, we got to move this. We got to shift that, like put that back in place. Da, 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 da. And then I've had also like mental improvements, where like people who have worked with me over time are just like, I had a client tell me the other day that they'd been in therapy for like 10 years and they were like, I've never shifted so fast as like when I started working with you. So like I get really beautiful feedback all the time, from the practical to the more like just I feel better or I feel more connected, or I feel more at peace. So it kind of covers the whole gamut. It's always really hard for me to figure out like even like what I serve, because to me it's just like anyone who feels they need something more than, you know, what they've been doing. Like a lot of times people come to me when they've kind of tried everything and they feel like they've hit a wall. And then they're like, something just tells them that this would be helpful. Um, or, you know, they just know they need something bigger.
Mm. I love that because in Ayurveda, it's actually it says the first cause of disease is a disconnect in spirit, and so often when people associate Ayurveda, it's like the diet and lifestyle practices and the physicality. So it's like, you know, like same with me. Like I get to work with women, and they've already got the perfect diet and lifestyle, morning routine. They've even started to do a lot of the cognitive work of limiting beliefs, but we're not tapping into that spiritual and that energetic body, which is a different way that anyone can tap into. But sometimes it could literally be like the snap of the fingers because they're finally like, yes, finally. That actually was me during my first Reiki or my second Reiki attunement. And I was trying to get my back my period for so long. I had done all the physical things in the world that I could do. And it was
Mhm.
the day after I got my Reiki attunement that I got my period back and started getting it back regularly. So like for
Wow.
some it happens that like quickness because it was ready for that to happen in their energetic field. And it makes sense for others. It's not because you know that 6 months from now 12 months from now like it needs to actually get into their system and there's like some other work that needs to settle down until
Definitely. I mean, I agree with you. I personally believe that our disconnect from soul and from a more like sort of 5D quantum space, whatever you want to call it, is our greatest sickness as humans.
totally.
And people label it a lot of other things, and we come up with little healing things here and there, and it's all well and good, and sometimes it really helps, but ultimately, I think there's a lot of us that just deep down know that we need something else. And for me, the mystical approach has always been
Mm.
the answer personally. Um, and so I tend to approach everything from that type of a space.
I want to go a little bit back to your journey with throat chakra healing because that's something that I'm always talking about in my community. And I think just like with women, the deep connection between the sacral and the throat chakra is just a constant theme. And in my own personal healing journey, so I love inspiring our community and personally being inspired by other stories because I imagine this is definitely your superpower. And I imagine it felt like your biggest challenge at some point. So I'd kind of love to hear like what was that transformation story?
Ooh, yeah, I have a major transformation story. So I was a singer my whole childhood. I was very in musical theater kind of things and always a performer. And I completely lost my voice, which looking back at it, I know was a trauma response. But at the time, no one had any answers for me. You know, this was 20 years ago and over 20 years ago, actually. And I was a teenager and all I wanted to do was sing, and my voice was completely shut down.
Wow.
And I was so devastated by this that that's actually what pushed me into alternative healing. I had a voice teacher at the time that recommended an energy healer to me. And you got to keep in mind, we're going back here to like the year 2000. This was like not so normal. This was not an accepted
Like a
thing.
high school teacher?
Yeah, it was a high school. Well, it was she was an independent voice teacher, but it was when I was in high school.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah, and she was in northern Chicago, this energy healer that she sent me to. And so I just started driving to her once a week. And the minute I met this woman, I just went, oh my gosh, who are you? Tell me everything. Like it was like all the light bulbs went off in me of just like, I've never been with someone who was so present and so in their heart and so aware.
Mm.
And so it woke me up. It was like, this is what I've been missing. And I started learning just endless things from her. She did so many things that are now considered normal that back then were not, like muscle checking and tapping and like frequency healing through like a frequency regulation machine and like, you know, just so many things. And she just blew my mind. So that's what got me into healing. But it would be many years of many layers for me to start to really open my voice again. Um, because I basically, at one point in my 20s, just gave up on singing altogether because it was just too painful. It was like this reminder almost of what I felt had been taken from me on some level. And so it wasn't until my late 20s that I really started opening back up again and finding a lot of pieces, piece by piece by piece, that clicked into place to heal the trauma that I'd been carrying my entire life, to get me comfortable again, sharing my voice, because I was very scared. For me, voice has always been the most vulnerable thing. And my journey of becoming comfortable sharing my toning work, sharing my singing voice, sharing my voice in general has been some of the most challenging work I've ever done. And I think some people will say, like, oh, just like don't be afraid, or like be yourself, or like just share openly, right? And I'm always like laughing at that, because I'm like, anyone who says that like has no idea, like they're not sharing from the depths of their soul if they're saying that so flippantly, because it will bring up every single fear and trauma that you have to share your voice in a vulnerable and authentic and soulfully aligned way. There's just, in this reality, there's no way around that. um, but once you do, the irony is that it actually protects you better than anything else. But it is a journey. And for me, it had so many layers. And so I actually kind of laugh even when people are like doing vocal awakening things, and it's just sort of like, sing this one seed sound. And I'm like, well, okay, that's like one, tiny piece. Like it helps, to do things like that. But it is actually healing the trauma of our whole system. Like our voice is involved in every single aspect of us. So,
Definitely. Oh, thank you
yeah.
for sharing that story. I know that's so inspiring for a lot of women. And particularly, I think right now with my community of women is, they're about to share their voice in their own unique way of like stepping into their business. And it's so interesting because it's like they know exactly what they need to be doing, but it's like you said, it's those blockages and whatever trauma that still needs to be processed that's really holding them back. And
Yeah.
it's really about following the breadcrumbs and noticing the layers with it. Like I've just really come to terms that like this is my karmic path. Like I'm never fully healed, whatever it is, but
Yeah.
I kind of love it because this gives me groundwork to be like, this is that thing again that's coming up for me. And now I know how to heal it. And it surprises me every time because it shows up in a different way. But I can celebrate the growth because I know it's happening in a deeper way this time. And I trust the growth and transformation that I've already done to get to this point that I can go to this next level.
Yes, definitely. And to be honest, every time fear comes up, it's usually a pretty big signal that we're going deeper.
Mm.
Like every time that there's, um, like a panic attack, or you're like, what am I doing? Or, it's usually a sign that you're expanding in some way. And like you said, the longer you're in the world of learning how to heal, the more you start to recognize that and have that awareness that, these things aren't always problems to be fixed. Like sometimes they're actually signals that something really profound is happening.
Mm.
And yeah, and I think for women especially, this journey is huge. I tend to work more with women. I work with men as well, but I've noticed I work with more women. And I think that's because women are unwinding, centuries of deep trauma of being told to have no voice,
Mm.
of being told their, and, I see this with POC as well, or, anyone that comes from a vulnerable community. If you have inherited trauma around not being able to have a voice, I mean, that is a very real embodied lived experience that does need to be confronted in this lifetime. And that's, some seriously deep work. So,
Definitely. Okay, so you have like all the knowledge bombs. I'm already thinking like, wow, there's so many different clips that I could take to for this podcast. I'm so excited. But I thoroughly love following you on TikTok because it's so funny. I always knew you were an MG, but like you give me projector vibes and just like being able to really see out there. And then like you think about topics, especially in new age spirituality, and you just get to see like the fuller, bigger picture, and it just like lands so well, and it feels like, yes, that's what that means, and that's what feels right and connected. So one thing that there's so many things. So anyone who's listening, if you're not already following Erin on TikTok and Instagram. Like she just has so many good wisdom knowledge bombs. But the one that I'm really interested in talking about today is the one about empaths and highly sensitive people. And that one like so harmoniously popped up in my field, and I just really want to hear your unique take on understanding what empaths and highly sensitive people are, because so often we hear, and I hear this all the time in my communities, it's like a victim, it puts us back in the victim mindset of like, I'm so sensitive and I can't be out there and it's too noisy and all these things. And it's truly like our greatest gift. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're opening up a whole other can of worms here, but let's.
Yeah, it is, but it's such a fun one. Yeah, it's funny. I was resistant to using the word empath for a lot of years, and I very strongly got a message in probably 2018 to start talking about empaths to people. And I think one of the reasons is because the word empath corrals a really important sector of our world, which is people who have intense feelings and intense sensitivity levels. And there are more and more of us every single day. And most of us have been told that those sensitivity levels are a liability and are a problem. And, now there's all kinds of hot takes on empaths on the internet. It's like, well, it's just people who have been traumatized in this specific way, or it's just people who, are neurodivergent, and all of these things can be true simultaneously. Like there are a lot of neurodivergent empaths, and there are a lot of people who are empaths or highly sensitives who have had very specific kinds of trauma that have created certain types of responses to the world and to people. But it also encompasses a huge amount of people that have been told that they are weak or that they are not good enough, when in reality, empathy is our absolute greatest strength. And it is the thing I think we need way more of in the world. We have enough shut down energy out there. We see it every single day acting out through everything in the world. Disassociation, disconnection, don't feel, toughen up, plow through it, all these things. Whereas the highly sensitives and the empaths are just taking in everything that everyone else refuses to feel or to acknowledge. In fact, you see this in family units a lot, where there's one person that's really sensitive, and they're usually labeled the problem child, and they're usually labeled the one that can't get it together, when in reality, they're probably the only one in the family that's acknowledging any of the deeper movement, energies, feelings, dynamics that are going on in the family unit. So you see this on a world level, you see this on a family level, you see this on an individual level. But every single highly sensitive person I know, where they are very sensitive is where their magic lies. That's where their gifts are. For example, I was someone who just swallowed everybody else's crap for many years on an energetic level. And I was so weighed down by it that I had many years where I couldn't feel anything. So I didn't realize how empathic I was until I was older. And I finally started really moving all of that stuff out of my body and my system. And I went, wow, I'm actually insanely sensitive. And I had just really numbed myself out to it, which we can look at from a neuroscience perspective. We can look at from, a trauma perspective. We can look at it from so many lenses. But for me, the healing came through a more mystical lens of all of those traumas and what I was truly holding. And after I really moved so much of it out, I realized that as a healer, those are my gifts. Like I know how to transmute energy so effectively, but I had to learn how to do it because we don't get taught these things as children. So almost every empath grew up with no guidance and no support on how to navigate the world as someone who either has very specific gifts or is very sensitive and attuned to the world around them.
So let's say someone's listening to this and they're just starting to notice their sensitivity and like kind of really waking up and noticing, I do take on others' emotions. I do actually feel things deeper. I don't want to choose numbing out substances or devices anymore. And what do I do with all of this energy?
Well, it's going to be unique for each person, but I would say a very basic thing to start doing is to notice the ways that you move energy most efficiently. So everyone tends to have different ways. Like for me, obviously it's singing, it's sound, but it's also movement and exercise, it's baths, it's long walks, it's connecting with soul family. Like I've noticed there are certain things and energetics that I can get into where if I'm holding on to something, it'll move a lot easier. Um, that being said, that's kind of just like surface level management at the end of the day. And we do eventually have to go deeper and start to unwind why you're maybe inappropriately energetically interacting with things around you, which most of us are, by the way. This is what we call boundaries. But really, boundaries to me are energetic agreements that we make with the world and other people. Most of us who are sensitive need to rework that in some way because we're probably taking things on we shouldn't take on. And so it's also very important to start shaping your life in a way that supports your well-being in that sense. So these are just very surface level, like first things that people do. And at some point you do have to go a lot deeper because it usually requires a lot deeper healing to rework your energy system in a way that works for you. Because most empaths are not using their energy in a way that serves them. They're usually working their energy in a way that hurts them and serves others more.
Right. How can empaths change their perspective that by feeding themselves first and taking care of their own energetic state, that that's actually going to be serving the collective more?
Yeah, that's a big unwinding of a belief system that's usually pretty ingrained in there. But what I would suggest is noticing how much better you show up when you are in a good place. Because it will at first feel selfish to take care of yourself on an energetic level. It's just kind of what it is. But as you start to unwind the patterns and the things that maybe you're doing that aren't so good for you and you feel really really good, you will see that actually when you show up from that space, you end up serving people a lot more. I am a far more effective healer because I don't swamp in other people's stuff. And I actually just have learned how to hold an energetic space that transmutes things without me having to take it into my body or process it. If I'm processing something for someone, I'm actually disempowering them and something has gone wrong. It's not everyone will want that. And that's something that's also interesting to watch. You'll have people in your life that want you to be swamped energetically. And those are usually the people that we want to start distancing ourselves from or having better boundaries with. But you will start to attract people that are really in appreciation of the space that you hold as you step into it more. So that will over time rewire those belief systems because usually those are pretty ingrained in people.
Yeah, definitely. That's totally been my experience is finally realizing like I think it's when you really realize like okay, this is my thing. Like I'm going to be a healer. So how am I able to efficiently do this? I have to be a clear channel, and that
Mm-hmm.
means it's so funny because it's like, "Oh my god, and that means me taking care of myself first when I thought being a healer is being in service to others." And then,
Mm-hmm.
it almost feels like what's the word I'm looking for? High maintenance to be like I need all this energetic hygiene because like there's a lot that my morning routine is long and nighttime routine is long, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
it really is treating yourself like the queen and like that's where the worthiness piece I think really comes out from. And I constantly still have to remind myself this because I'm like, gosh, why do I need so much? Like alone time is so important to me, and I know I get so, and it's hard because I love being around people, I truly do, but I will just get so agitated and irritated if I'm like on a trip with like a group of people, and after like a couple of days I'm like cannot.
Yeah,
I need
it's
to
a
like
lot.
take that time for myself, I know, and just like reflect. And especially being a projector, like there's so many things that I'm observing and trying to digest all the time. It's like
Yeah.
it's just like essential to my being to have to do. So it really is coming to terms with like who you are, your truest state, and just
Mm-hmm.
accepting and allowing it. And through my own experience, like yeah, I've been able to hold so much space for others, and then like my soulmate clients who I feel really nourished from them too. Like I noticed that I wasn't taking on clients where, after a session I'd just be like so drained, or like I would go
Mm-hmm.
and grab a snack after because like I just needed like energy and like something to fill me up again.
Yeah.
It definitely happened over time. It like wasn't like a night and day type of thing, but
Yeah. It
something.
takes time. But I mean, you're a projector, and that makes perfect sense for you. And this is why I do use human design in my work, and I love human design, is because I do think it can really help people understand their energy body and their energy systems and how to sort of work with the energetic setup that we've been given, and like sort of help us understand where our sensitivities tend to lie, and where we can get energetically hooked into patterns that aren't so great, because everybody has them. And you do need a lot of alone time, you know. So I mean, everybody does, in my opinion, but I think projectors need it even more than everybody else. So, you know, it is like a matter of deciding that you're going to take care of yourself so that you can be of better service to others. And ultimately, it does make us more in service to our communities and the work that we're here to do, to bring our energy home, as I tell everyone, because most empaths have not given themselves permission to do that. And it definitely is a worthiness thing, but worthiness also gets oversimplified. That is also a very deep journey of remembering the truth of who we are beyond our humanness. And again, that's a step by step process. So I think really being patient with yourself and self forgiveness are so huge on this journey, because one of the biggest like cruxes I see in the spiritual world is just everybody's sort of attempts to fix themselves and find the answers. And it's sort of like, you know, deep down underneath that, like, what are we really trying to fix here? And sort of getting to that space of unconditional love, for our own journey and our own selves and experience.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You mentioned needing to have like stronger boundaries around people who may be wanting your energy at the expense of you, and just needed to have like a bigger loving distance between those people. And lately I've been kind of contemplating, you know, sometimes I feel like I can get in my own bubble where I'm around spiritual people or people who are thinking on a similar frequency as me, and then I come across other people, or you know, I have lots of different friends who are on different frequencies and different journeys, and it looks different. But
Hmm.
yeah, I know you know where I'm going with this. I'm trying to get it out. But what about the people who are like kind of in between, you know, where it's like, okay, they're slightly draining my energy. It's like not the most fruitful conversation, but how can I just separate myself? Because like I'm not going to go through life just not being able to live life and live in my own little
Yeah.
bubble wrapped world with it. But what is like a really nuanced way to just say, okay, that's their opinion. Like I'm not taking that on myself. How have you able to kind of structure those boundaries?
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, it is always our responsibility to decide what works for us and what doesn't. Like if we're around someone who maybe just thinks a little bit differently than us, um, you know, and maybe it's triggering us in some way, or it's feeling uncomfortable in some way. Like that trigger, that uncomfortability is the gateway. That's the doorway of what's going on within you. You know, like it's always very important to, I think, bring these things back to ourselves, not in a way where we blame ourselves, but in a way where we can understand what's the deeper message? What am I being called to? And sometimes we're being called to put distance between ourselves and a person. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're being called to reorganize energetically something that works for us or doesn't. And that can be as simple as a conversation with the person. Like, hey, I love you, but maybe this specific way of doing this isn't working for me, you know, like depending on what the problem is. And by the way, people who, you know, are worth having around will respect, I think, those boundaries and those requests. But also, you know, there's always sort of a different calling in every moment, I think. There have been times where I've had to sort of rearrange energetically, like what is okay for me, you know, and what isn't okay for me, with the people in my life. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the questions, but I think it is always unique and very individual to the situation or the person.
Definitely. I feel like it's an endless journey of creating and restructuring boundaries as an empath because, like you said, it just makes sense. Like you have different needs and wants that constantly need to be renegotiated. And I think probably on a personal level, like my biggest challenge with that is like being able to ask for more and being okay with like if I have a bigger need and want before, like on the surface level it seems like it wouldn't be a big deal to a lot of people, and like maybe like I'm asking for too much because no one else is doing it, but it's
Mhm.
me taking that extra step to say no, this is actually what I need, and I'm going to renegotiate that for that, even though I can't totally see how this is going to affect me. This is what spirit is telling me I need to do right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that unfortunately empaths do struggle with voicing their needs. It's a huge commonality amongst sensitive people or empaths because most of us are pretty terrified of the reactions we're going to feel from others, which is a part of the healing process for a sensitive person, to be okay with the reactions of other people, and not either A, try to control it, or B, avoid it. But, I think that all we ever can do is be true to our own needs in every moment. And everyone else has their own responsibility of if that's okay for them or not. And when we're really accepting of that and that process of like, maybe I need something right now, but this person doesn't feel they can show up to that, like, that's okay too. Like, we're all allowed to have our own needs, and others are allowed to then make a decision for themselves of what's okay for them.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so final question. I just want to end like on a really light note. What
Mhm.
are some rituals that you're really loving on that feels really good for your energetic system right now?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, I started our conversation playing a tuning fork, and I love little gadgets like that. Like, I love instruments, and sound healing instruments, but also even like the guitar, the piano. Like, I love all of that. I am a obsessive cacao drinker, as you know. So every single day of my life, I drink ceremonial cacao, and that just makes me so happy inside every morning. It's like truly one of my greatest joys, is my morning cup of cacao, and that time I get to connect with myself. I try to meditate every day. I'm not always great at it, and I think that's also just part of life, is being okay with that. Like, we're going to have some good days and some bad days, but for me, meditation is like the juiciest, most nourishing space that I can give myself, to remember that I am not just this human self and there's something so much bigger there. Um, and, playing. I'm a big believer in play and laughter and lightness. I think sometimes the healing journey and the spiritual journey gets such a heavy reputation, which I understand, because most of us who are in it because we've gone through something really serious. Um, but also, I think there's so much healing and joy and laughter and play, and remembering to find those things that really bring you, um, expansion and joy, I think are very important. So,
Mm, yeah, I'm so grateful you introduced me to cacao. I'm like always looking up ceremonies now when I'm in LA because it's just like it is so fun and everything that I need usually in the moment.
mhm.
And I love the theme of joy. It's definitely been a theme going on my healing journey right now, and I'm so happy you introduced me to Sarah Mace's next series because I just finished Throne of Glasses, and now I'm on
Oh yeah.
a Court of Roses. Is that what it's
Yeah, Court of Thorns and Roses. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun.
called? I know, I'm so excited. They like finally got into like fairyland, and I'm like, this is life. Like,
I know. I love a good escapist read. It's one of, people are always like, "Oh, what like serious spiritual books are you reading?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so done with that phase in my life. Like, I've read every self-healing book you can imagine, every spiritual book you can imagine. And for the last like 8 to 10 years, for me, it's just been so much more about joy. And I'm all about, lighthearted, fun movies, fun play. People are often surprised to learn that about me because of the nature of my work. Like, they're like, "What? You're into that?" And I'm like, "Of course, it's so fun."
sure, for sure. Do you have any recent movies that you've seen that you really love?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I've been watching a lot of movies lately because I'm in Chicago and it's cold. So I've been like, like nestling in. And so I'm trying to think what was really great. But I watched, what was it called? Bros? Is it called Bros? It was a comedy movie, about a gay couple.
Oh, I love
Oh my
that.
gosh. It was so funny. It was really so cute and funny. I've also been watching Shrinking. I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen
yeah, I've
that
seen
show.
that.
It's really good. It's hysterical. Like I
Is that
love comedy.
me too?
Hmm?
I love comedy.
Yeah.
Is that an Apple?
It's actually, yeah, it's on Apple, unfortunately. I know most people, don't have
But
that, but
honestly, anything Apple puts out is so good though.
I know it's honestly hysterical. Like I've been really surprised how funny it is. But yeah, if I can find something that'll really, I love anything by Mindy Kaling. Like
I love
Kaling, I may have said her name wrong. But yeah, she like all her Never Have I Ever and Sex Lives of College Girls. Like I just the goofy humor is just my happy place. So
oh,
good.
I love it all.
Yeah, me
Oh,
too.
I love it so much. This has been so fun reconnecting with you and getting to hear more of your genius on the pod. And I would love for you to share how our community can further connect with you, get some of your sound frequency amazingness.
Yeah, so I have a sound frequency meditation that I send out if you sign up for my newsletter. So that's a really good way to try it, because it's one of these things where I think it's hard to understand until you've sat with it and experienced it for yourself. And so it's a really great one that I have on there that I give away. It's a nervous system regulation one, and it's actually one of my favorites. It's one that I listen to myself quite often, which is why I made it my free one because I was like, like this one's kind of one I think that can apply to a lot of people. Like everybody needs nervous system regulation. And so, yeah, that's a really great way. My Instagram is Erin Eber. I definitely use Instagram a lot because I just think it's such a fun way to connect and stay connected to people, as well as my TikTok, which is Frequency Portal. But to stay up to date on my offerings, I also do a monthly call. It's a monthly group call that I just do because it's a really accessible way to connect with my work. I like having something out there that's just like really easy, because I know not everybody has the money to invest in private sessions right away. So, my group calls are very transformative. People are constantly telling me how powerful they are for them. And so, yeah, that's something that I offer as well.
Oh my God, I love all of that. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
that link below, and I actually just started following your newsletter and hearing about your group circle, so I'm gonna try to hit up the March one because
Oh, I would love that. Actually, I'm not doing one in March. I'm so sorry. Because I'm gonna be in Thailand and it's my birthday at the end of March. So I was
oh
like, you
my
know what? I
gosh,
think I think I'm taking March off. But I'll be back at it after that. And might I put out like random workshops sometimes and different things when I get inspired. I'm very much a creature of my inspiration, like I have a hard time like doing things the way you're supposed to do them. I'm just sort of like, and spirit told me to put this out, so I'm doing it.
I mean, that's the only way to do it. It's you got to follow your intuition.
Hmm.
I'll be on the lookout. I know you'll do one soon.
Yes. I would so love to have you there. So, yes, please come.
Yeah, 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 everyone. So definitely check out Erin Eber, Sound Frequency Queen. I can
Mhm.
attest to having all of her magical modalities. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. It was such a fun conversation.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun. And I just really appreciate you doing this and having me on today.
Of course. All right, everyone. I'll see you next time.